over 100 people. There's a real hunger to learn about local place plans, but it also shows that those of you who are here, whether you're considering or already started doing a local place plan, are part of a growing group, possibly, I hesitate to call it a movement, but of folks who are keen and interested in developing community-led plans, of which local place plans are a particular type. But just be encouraged by that and realize that you're part of a wider, there's loads of people in Scotland that have done them, are doing, or considering doing them. And what I always say to groups is that we're all people who inherit our places. We either move to them or we're born in them. We inherit there's lots of good assets and good things about our places, but we don't, we don't create them. We inherit them. And we can't ever pay that back, but we can pay it forward. And it's not, it's a bit of a thankless task to do that, to spend the time that you are all spending thinking about this stuff and then delivering plans. And Chiara and I the most important thing we want to do tonight is just to encourage you all and thank you for your investment and your time to do that. It's really worth it, although it's unsung. So please receive that encouragement. Because encouragement's our lifeblood and it's the foundation of our relationships, and these processes are inherently relational. We need to get relational always before we get solutional. So the PDF's going to be sent around. We're taking a video, but this session is the beginning of an introduction to local place plans. It's a big topic because it also encompasses the idea of community-led plans in general. So how to run them, how to enable them to happen, and also the specifics about local place plans themselves. So we're going to be doing them over 2 sessions. This is the first session. We would normally do this training all as a one-er, but we want to split it up and break it up and give you more time for questions and answers. So in this session, we're going to focus on what a local place plan is. And my name's Paul, and this is Chiara. I run my own company called Place at the Table, and Chiara and Ellie are part of Imagine If. And Place at the Table, we do project management, facilitation, policy work, writing draft plans, coding data, training, mentoring, mediation. We do all these things. You can get in touch. I've got a background in planning and community development. I've run these plans for like 8 years, and I'm currently doing about 5 or 6 of them. Chiara.
Yeah, evening everyone. And so similarly, I work alongside Paul quite often through our social enterprise Imagine If. And we cover a similar range of things in terms of local place plan consultancy, but also a lot of kind of general community engagement and that kind of project management piece about taking projects from paper and actually delivering them and working through that with communities across Scotland at the moment. We are architects by trade, so yeah, have that particular interest in the sort of housing and project coordination side. But yeah, through these, Paul, if you can skip to the next slide, through these training sessions, really what we're hoping to do is kind of, if you're not already set up and running a local place plan, or even if you're midway through the process, hopefully there'll be some hints and tips around kind of key building blocks of getting towards your local place plan. So as Paul's mentioned, the first one this evening is really what is a local place plan? And then the second part to the introduction is the kind of who, when, why, and how of a local place plan. The subsequent weeks, so weeks 3, 4, 5, and 6, then delve into a bit more specifics. So week 3 is around project managing. Week 4 is designing that engagement strategy. Week 5 is processing the data, and week 6 is that kind of policy piece. So writing your statement of regard to statutory plans. And we've got some good hacks around how to do that, because we appreciate it can be an overwhelming task if you're not already kind of in the field. There's also, I think it's useful to point out at this point, there's an emerging, growing range of resources that are really helpful. So we just wanted to also highlight, in addition to these sessions, some other ones, and there'll be embedded links in the PDF that we send around. So we've got Planning Aid Scotland's resource. That 3-part guide is really helpful to really kind of delve in and understand the different parts of the process in a bit more detail. SCDC have also run some really great kind of in-conversation pieces, and that's really nice to just hear from people who are actively been involved in that process. And also there's emerging local authority guides, so it is worth looking at your own local authority and seeing what guidance they offer, but also worth kind of looking around as well, and there's some kind of good ones out there. So there is support out there. It's just about wayfinding and signposting, and that's hopefully what we'll do through these sessions as well.
It's always helpful to have a whole. Oh, sorry, Ciara.
No, on you go.
But it's always helpful to have a hand to reach out to and someone to draw alongside. So that's what we're going to do tonight. So the 6 questions are what, who, where, when, why, and how. And we're going to focus on what tonight. What is a local place plan? So what kind of questions might you have about what is a local place plan? First one, do we have to do an LPP to get our voices heard? No. All of the usual consultation processes that were already in place to influence the local development plan are continuing. So you can always do responses and input to your local development plan as you always were able to as community councils, either in early stages of the process or during the proposed plan stage. But a local place plan gives you a chance to put out your vision really clearly in a document, have it registered, and it'll be there and available as a public record of what you've said, in addition to having other benefits. What additional benefit can a local place plan offer over a community action plan might be another question. Well, we're going to answer that question tonight. Can a local place plan be developed from an existing community action plan? It certainly can. Many communities are doing that. Can we do one consultation process to create a CAP, a community action plan, and a local place plan? Absolutely. You can. Can a local place plan leverage changes in council service delivery? Maybe. We'll come back to that later. It's definitely not a given. There's no formal mechanism to leverage or expect other council departments apart from spatial planning to respond to or implement the stuff that you put in your plan. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. But I think you need to be prepared to be very proactive after you've written your plan and submitted it to keep lobbying the various departments. And finally, what does a proposal in a local place plan even look like? Well, here you go. This is one that I did in 5 minutes. This is a proposal in a local place plan, and a slightly imaginary one from my local town, Buckhaven in Fife. You can see the number at the top. You can imagine that you might have 10, 15, maybe 20 proposals. You could just have one. A local place plan could be just one site if you really wanted it to be. We're imagining this is the second proposal in a plan, and it's to develop a community garden. Now, you can do a community action plan and a local place plan. They're both intertwined. They're both talking about place. A community action plan is to help communities gather their resources, think about how to work together. You might even come up with a delivery plan. Whereas a local place plan gives you an extra ability to also try and influence the planning system. So what we have here, we've got a map, simple map taken from Open Maps. We've put that into slides or PowerPoint. We've put a red line around a spot, which is derelict and vacant land. And we've numbered it, number 2. And we've said, okay, we want to, in the next couple of years, create a community garden on this derelict and vacant land. So in terms of the CAP project, the lead organisation is a local charity called Clear. We want to deliver it within 2 years. We want to partner with Fife Council and residents. And the first step is to secure funding and buy the land. That's what you would traditionally put into a community action plan. You probably wouldn't have the map. For a local place plan, you pop in the map, you show the site, and what's the proposal for the local place plan? It's not a project, it's a proposal. Well, the proposal would be that because we're planning this in the future, we want to ask for planning permission in principle through the next local development plan for a change of use for this site from the former use, which was a pub, even though it's not there anymore, to a community garden. And we give reasons for that by saying in planning policy terms, linked to the National Planning Framework, Policy 9 Brownfield supports this, and Policy 25 Community Wealth Building also supports this. So unlike a CAP, we've got a map, and we're putting reasons forward in planning terms why this should be okay. And we're asking the council to include that in the local development plan. That is a proposal. That is a simple, straightforward proposal. Bam. That's how easy it could be to put that together. Ciara.
So now that you've seen a little sample of what kind of goes in a local place plan proposal, I think it's helpful to zoom back out and just say, okay, well, what is a local place plan? Well, the way kind of Paul and I think about it is it's that expression of a community's aspirations, which can influence local spatial planning policy. And it can do this in two ways: setting out priorities to regulate future development in an area, and we'll come on to what we mean by that shortly, and also helping communities to develop and deliver their own projects. And again, we're going to be talking about that in subsequent training sessions, but also touch on it a little bit later on. It can also be a hybrid document, so this can have elements of your community action plan within it, and it's really about covering all of the issues that your community needs or your place needs to thrive. So it's a kind of chance to have that holistic view of your place and your community and really begin to think around that future development and what that might look like. Next. And so what might the boundary be for your local place plan? So that can be a whole range of things. More often than not, it's looked at as a sort of community council boundary. So the first example there on the left is Callander. So Callander's local place plan used its community council boundary to define what it declared within its local place plan. Whereas the middle diagram you see there is a sample. Again, that's looking at not just a single community council boundary, but actually more of a kind of regional kind of approach. And then last but not least, on the right-hand side, you can actually just have it literally at a site scale. So there's not necessarily a specific thing, but what is important is that you clarify what the boundary of your local place plan is. And also what we refer to as the community body, which we will kind of come back to in a bit more detail in subsequent bits, and who counts as a community body and what does that look like as well. And so now we've thought about that, we're going to think about also what can the local place plan influence, because that's also quite important when we're thinking about what a place plan is. So Paul, I'll hand back to you for that.
Yep. That's really odd. For some reason, this isn't clicking forward. Apologies, everybody. Don't know what's going on there. That's a bit disappointing. Chiara, can you...
Yeah.
Hang on a second.
Maybe you can stop. That's
There
it.
we go.
That's
Sorry about that. A
amazing.
little bit of a hiatus. Professionalism falls apart. That's okay. Like, we don't have to be super duper professional with these things. And we just need to recognize that we're trying to do the best we can with the resources we have. So before we jump into what local place plans can do, we need to just remind ourselves what local development plans are, so that we can know how to influence them. And if you're anything like me, you get really frustrated with all the acronyms out there: LPPs, CAPs, LDPs, LOIPs, NPF4. So this is the way I break it down. Try and remember this stuff. Very simply, we've got a column on the left, national, regional, and local, and then two columns with the heading overview and development place. So at the national level, what we do is every few years the government creates something called the National Performance Framework, or NPF, which is trying to get some metrics together and cast a vision for where we want to get to as a nation, in a whole range of different indices and areas, from education to housing to, well, everything really. And that gets renewed every few years. And we should all be technically trying to work towards that, or at least that's how the government tries to figure out where we're going. That works itself out at regional level below. Local authorities are expected to create what's known as a local outcome improvement plan, or LOIP. And that is the same thing for their whole area, for their whole region, just at a different scale. And then at the local level, what we've always been able to do, and will continue to be able to do, we don't have to do an LPP as a community, is create a community action plan to gather our thoughts together, cast our vision across a range of different stuff, and figure out how to organise and deliver that for ourselves and advocate to others to make that happen. Whereas the development place column at a national level, National Planning Framework 4, also known as NPF, confusingly, I think of that as the where of the National Performance Framework. If we want to do all these things, where are we going to do them? And how do we regulate the development that is required to happen to make that happen? And or how do we control things like biodiversity and conservation, or conservation areas, through that? Then at a regional level, that's the regional expression of National Planning Framework 4. Now, from here on in, if you're thinking about doing a local place plan to influence your local development plan, and you want a little crystal ball about what your local development plan is actually going to look like in the future, go and read National Planning Framework 4, because now and from here on in, that is the core of the next local development plan in your area. So you already know what will be at the heart of your local development plan, and you can think about it that way. So local authorities expand on NPF4 over the next period of time to create their local development plan, which articulates the where of their LOIP, their local outcome improvement plan. And now we've got this new vehicle, local place plan, which can run alongside a community action plan, but is designed to influence the local development plan from the bottom up. That came in with the 2019 Planning Act. It's an ability to create our own policies, to try and have them written into the powerful statutory document known as the local development plan. And all of these things should be talking to one another. One final wee plan that's important for you in thinking about a local place plan, particularly with regard to the regulations, is something called a locality plan, which is kind of between a LOIP and a CAP, and that's prepared by the Community Planning Partnership area people in your area, and its focuses on poverty. So if there is a locality plan for your area, be aware of that and what it says, and try and bring it into your plan. So that's how we think about it, trying to get these connections and understand the differences. So National Performance Framework, that's the symbols and images on the left, and that's you can download these. We've got links embedded in the document, and you can start reading through the policies and goals for these. The trick with NPF4 is to think of it as your big brother. You can bring NPF4 to the fight, if you like. What I mean by that, I don't want to be combative in my metaphors, but the policies in National Planning Performance Framework 4 are quite powerful. And what we're trying to do with local place plans from a community point of view is say what we want to say about what should happen in our area in terms of development, and use the policies in National Planning Framework 4 to justify or add weight to the reasons that we give forward as to why it should be that way, so that between the national and the local, we influence the regional. And we say, this is what we think, that's what the national document thinks, what's your take? And invite local authority planning people to respond to that. So as an example, we're working in Argyll and Bute. This is their local outcomes improvement plan. There's one for every one of your areas, and this is their current local development plan 2, and they're working towards local development plan 3 at the moment. And you get maps, you get policies, and you get connections. And often a local authority will have a website where you can zoom in and zoom out, or possibly just a static document where you can read up in your area about the things that control development and where they're located. So you might already have a community action plan. You might decide to do a community action plan first, to go wide to your community, learn about what they want to do, figure out a delivery plan, figure out how you're going to go about it, and then do a local place plan off the back of that to sort of build from your community action plan. That's absolutely fine. That's what happened in Morven, north of Mull, 3 years ago. They created their community action plan, and now they're creating a local place plan. Chiara.
And so just building on that last slide there, Paul showing that example of Morven being that community action plan and local place plan, I think it's important that everyone notes that there's no one size fits all with a local place plan. They all look and feel completely different. There's definitely a key set of things in terms of legislation that they have to have. And again, we'll go through those towards the end of the session and in subsequent trainings. But on the screen here is just a range of plans that myself and Paul have been involved with in various shapes and guises. But as you can see on the screen here, you've got ones that are kind of more sophisticated in their mapping, but equally ones that are registered that are simple, just to the point, and can be done with all open source materials. So again, what we like to kind of talk to people around is that it doesn't have to be all bells and whistles, but equally there's nothing to stop you doing that. But the more important thing is making sure the content is there and articulated clearly in terms of what you're wanting to put forward as that kind of community voice. So we're not going to go into too much detail about, one specific plan that's particularly good, because as I say, they all need to respond to that individual context of your place. and your community and what you're trying to achieve collectively. But we will go through some hints and tips and, what is better practice, and maybe also things to maybe avoid and consider. So yeah, next slide. Thanks, Paul. So basically, what's the difference between a community action plan and a local place plan? While some of you might be really familiar with this, we've also just kind of put together this little table, which gives you a kind of snapshot around that. So I'm just going to talk that through quite briefly here. In terms of a plan's focus, so if we look at the community action plan side, we've put in capital letters community, because that is really about the people side, right? So it's about kind of service provision and things like that, whereas local place plan is about development. And then if we move down to the scope, we've got projects and initiatives of all types on the community action plan side, whereas on the local place plan side, that's really about proposals, which are relating to use of development of land and buildings, and that's controlled by the planning system. So the community action plan really is that kind of more all-encompassing, people-focused, and also can include buildings and other things, but really the local place plan is that focus around spatial considerations in terms of the built and natural environment and things that the planning process and system has an influence and say over. So in terms of outputs, again, back to the community action plan side, we'll quite often see with that a delivery plan. So that could include things like, your lead organisation, timeframes, etc., but not necessarily any required reasons as such. Whereas on the local place plan side, spatial vision, maps are kind of key element of that. And again, some of the later sessions will talk about that in more detail. But really, in terms of an output, a local place plan is about having that sort of justification for your proposals to be accepted into the local development plan, which controls future development. So there's not necessarily a delivery plan attached to it, but it's more that justification as to why that should be included in that kind of policy document. And then in terms of leadership, both community-led, and that's a really important point. And then in terms of outcomes, again, they're very similar, but on the community action plan side, we've got community organising, things like for securing funding, planning for community-led delivery. And then on the local place plan side, again, there's still that element of community organising, but it's really critically that bit around influencing spatial planning. And then in terms of traction, again, community agency on the community action plan side and advocacy, and local place plan, that is a decision ultimately kind of by the local authority or the planning authority. But I think the main thing I would like you to take away from this slide really is that top piece around community action plan being community development, and then local place plan still about community development, but more on the emphasis on the development side. Next slide, thanks, Paul. Pass back to you.
Yes. So yeah, thank you. So you can do a community action plan. That might be the right thing for your community just now. You might be having a think, do I even want to do a local place plan? You could do a local place plan on its own and just focus on trying to influence planning policy and the local development plan, or you can do them together. You could, there's no reason why you can't use the same consultation processes to be able to do the whole thing, to create a delivery plan and do the proposals. It's just kind of more work. You could do a community action plan first and then a local place plan, or you can do them side by side. So there's lots of different ways to skin the cat. It doesn't really matter what you call your plan. You could say, I'm doing a local place plan and it's got community action plan elements and local place plan elements. But it's important to be aware of the differences of what they can each do, and to make sure that our expectations are really clear. So a local place plan can achieve certain things if you jump through the right hoops and you speak to the right council department and you put forward these proposals for regulating development. But it's just an extra arrow in your quiver. What I mean by that is communities have always been able to do community action plans. They're always will be able to. You can do it. You don't have to ask anyone to do it. Just get on with it. It's fine. But there are some hoops to jump through, which we'll get to if you want to do a local place plan. And it's a special new opportunity that we've never had before, where community groups can actually articulate and write what they would want to see as local planning policy and maps for their area. Put that forward for assessment. The local authority retains the final decision to arbitrate whether that proposal will go forward into the local development plan and gain statutory weight. but they have to give an account as to why they haven't done that. So there's an accountability within the process. They should do that just before the big proposed plan for the next local development plan comes out. You'll be able to read those reasons and then use the next consultation process, which is a 3-month process, to then query and have dialogue with the local authority as to why they have or haven't included your proposals. So it's potentially quite powerful. You've got a statutory right to prepare it, although it doesn't become a statutory document in and of itself. It does become a material consideration, something that matters in the planning system. And any site-specific development that comes forward where there's a local place plan that has been validated and registered on the local authority system, any site-specific application from the moment of registration should take into account anything that your local place plan says about that site as something that matters and needs to be puzzled through and thought through in the report of handling, and can be picked up by planning committee or the case officer as part of the weighting of their assessment towards that development. But it's not only the local development plan as a statutory document. So the different things you can use an LPP for, where you could de-risk development by your own community group. You might be thinking about buying a building and getting a change of use on it, or getting some derelict and vacant land and creating a community garden. Or you might be thinking that field could be quite good if in future we buy it for affordable housing. Well, you can de-risk it by getting planning permission in principle through the local development plan process by submitting an LPP, just like other developers do. That you can make suggestions for how developer contributions should be spent to try and influence developer behavior through your plan. So developer contributions are tricky. They're quite governed by legal processes, and there's only certain things you can expect through a development that might come forward. But you could be clear about the kind of green spaces, play parks, or what you would consider to be acceptable affordable housing. You could even put in some ideas and costs for what you think should happen. You can give precision for regulatory policy. So if you want to say, let's have a nature network in our area, you could say, well, these are the places where I think really good stepping stones or routes could be for those nature networks or for active travel. And you can get some real granularity into that planning authorities wouldn't otherwise be able to get. And the whole thing is going to kickstart really transparent, hopefully, conversations with landowners. A lot of local landowners become quite interested if community groups are starting to create a LPP, because they know that that's going to have consequences or ideas for the use of land, possibly stuff that they might own. So that often create an initial opportunity to engage with and have a reason to doorstep your local landowners, to invite them to be transparent if they can and want to be about their future plans. So it's creating a mediative environment, which can be really valuable. And it's a public record of your position to influence the LDP itself. In terms of council service delivery, there is no requirement for any other department in the council to respond to the contents of your local place plan or CAP, but they can. So they can proactively do that. We want to encourage them to do that. We want councils corporately to do that, but there's no inherent leverage through a local place plan, any more so than a CAP, apart from using that as justification for your mandate, going and speaking to your councillors and continuing that dialogue. So hopefully these will be picked up, but it's not a given. Keep at it. So you might cast your net out as part of a consultation process around your community. You might be doing a CAP and thinking about LPP, but basically you're casting your net out. You're asking people, what do you want to see for the future of our areas? And you're going to catch different things. You're going to catch, as Kiara and I put it, fish and crabs, right? The fish, all the catch is valuable. Whether people are talking about their concerns around dog poo, or whether they're talking about, by the way, if you get a consultation, you don't get some dog poo back, then you absolutely know that someone's just made that one up in an office. People could be talking about setting up a youth group. They could be talking about affordable housing. They could be talking about controlling biodiversity. So you're going to be getting stuff that is to do with community action plans, but you're also going to get stuff that has more of a spatial element or a policy element, the crabs. Now, because we're going to get all of that stuff in during our consultation process, it's just about discerning which is which. So the crabs are stuff to do with land and use of buildings, sorry, the land use and buildings that are controlled by the planning system. And then the fish are just everything else. Now, if you're just running an LPP, you could just focus on the crabs and that catch if you want to. If you're just doing a cap, you could focus on the fish and just develop them, or you can develop both at the same time. Crabs and fish, you're going to get them either way. So a little quiz. So we've been doing a lot of talking. Before we go to Q&A, before Chiara gets us to land, what stuff might be for a cap and what stuff might be for a local place plan? Just in your own homes and in front of your own screens, you might want to grab a bit of paper. We're going to go through this list. I'm going to ask these as questions. Just take notes as to whether you think the following initiatives or ideas or things would most suit a community action plan or a local place plan, and then we'll discuss them afterwards. So setting up a youth project, would that live most at home in a community action plan or a local place plan, or both? Measures to control traffic speeds, community action plan, local place plan, or both? Making our town centre better, CAP, LPP, or both? Protecting our heritage buildings. What about dog fouling? Where does that most find a home easily? Or even most easily find a home? Developing more affordable homes. Which plan would be best for that? Setting up an annual gala day. Adapting our town to be prepared for the impacts of climate change. This is one that Chiara and I are really passionate about and want to encourage communities to think about. Proposals to change the policy text of the local development plan. Proposal to control short-term lets. Securing primary healthcare for the area. Ideas for paths and cycle routes. CAP, LPP, or both? Right, usually we get people to provide their own answers, but we don't quite have time, so I'm just going to run through these. And you may disagree. There could be some different perspectives on this, but setting up a youth project, you don't need to do an LPP to do that, but you do need to do a CAP would have delivery time frames, process, who's going to do it? Measures to control traffic speeds. Well, if it's an existing route, you need to talk to roads. So this is an advocacy thing for a community action plan. If you're thinking about a new development that might come to your area and you're concerned that any new development should have speed controls on it as part of that development, that could be a proposal for a local place plan. Making our town set, because that's development like that is controlled by planning, whereas traffic speeds on existing roads is controlled by roads departments. Making our town centre better. That's an LPP thing. So explaining a vision for your town centre can go into a local place plan, but it could also be a community action plan thing, because part of that could be your community group just wants to put in planters, flower beds. Well, just go and do it. That's great. Protecting our heritage buildings. Well, if you want to expand your conservation area, possibly propose a listing for your building, or have a building recognised as special and valuable to your community, that's an LPP thing. If you want to set up a group to actually renovate an old building, that's a CAP thing. Dog fouling, community action plan. Wanting to develop more affordable homes, either as a developer or ensure that there's a policy to control developers, private developers, delivering them, LPP. An annual gala day, that's CAP. Adapting our towns to the impacts of climate change, that could be LPP proposals to go forward to your council. Proposals to change the policy text of the LDP. Well, you can propose through a local place plan that you want to retain the policy in the existing plan, You might want to retain the green belt. You might want to retain the percentage of affordable homes that's already being required. You can advocate for that as a proposal, or you could ask to change certain text within existing policies within the LDP. Short-term lets, North Berwick have put forward a proposal to have a short-term let control area around their entire town, but they've justified it. They've put reasons for that. Securing primary healthcare is a tricky one. Not even the NHS really controls that because it's a partnership thing for doctors. But you might use a cap to market how great your place is and your vision for your place to attract doctors. You might use an LPP to say, if there's going to be more housing, please allocate this land or some land for a potential future surgery. Paths and cycle routes, definitely ideas and routes for potential future active travel networks. That would be a really good thing to do. But behind all of this, remember, putting stuff into a local place plan as a proposal, getting it into the local development plan, there still has to be someone that will develop that thing, whether it's the public, private, or community sector. It's not automatically going to happen, but if it's in the LDP, you've got there's some power and weight for future planning applications and/or to control or regulate land use. Chiara.
Thanks, Paul. So hopefully that was helpful to get you in the headspace of getting thinking around what's kind of community action plan related and what's local place plan related. And we just kind of wanted to end tonight's session just with a bit of a reminder about a checklist that is kind of available in terms of actually thinking about, you know, what is in a local place plan or what has to be in a local place plan. And to the left, you know, it's just a kind of fun, happy picture to say, yes, we've all got to jump through hoops, but it is worth it for what you end up getting. So this checklist is taken out of the planning circular, which is some guidance that's available around local place plans. And just because I want to make sure we have plenty of time for Q&A, I'm not going to read through the full thing or anything, but just to highlight, I guess, a couple of points. That kind of clarification around the confirmation of your community body's status is really important. And we'll pick that up in the next week's session, really around the who element. Also the core content of proposal of the local place plan. So obviously you've got your map of your boundary and things, but also a map of or a statement where you've actually delineated what your proposals are. And also 7 and 8, really thinking of those two as not quite one and the same thing, but they can be looked at together. So again, the final session that we're going to run in this training will touch on that. And then there is certain things you need to comply with in terms of information notice periods, and also things around additional evidence, which could be, for example, in terms of evidence around your community support for local place plan and proposals, or how your community bodies actually reached out. And again, we'll kind of touch on that a little bit more in next week's session, and also in the engagement strategy session around that, and the sort of requirements or not set requirements around some of that. Next slide, thanks, Paul. But really, the final slide is really just a kind of quote to say, don't let the perfect get in the way of the good, because as much as we would like all these processes to be like on the money in every way, shape or form, there's so much out with our control. And also Paul's phrase of, you know, we did the best we could with the resources we had is also really important to remember. So whilst, yes, we all want the bells and whistles, actually we can keep it super pragmatic and use open source materials. And again, we'll talk about doing that. So we want to try and empower as many people as possible to do these and have their kind of voices heard across the across Scotland, really. And final slide, thank you, Paul. And that's really it from us tonight. Hopefully that's been a helpful introduction. So thank you very much for taking the time to listen. And really just a kind of closing question to everyone to just think about, you know, is a local place plan right for your group? And again, hopefully through these subsequent training sessions, you'll begin to, you know, figure that out, but at least have a kind of basis and understanding to make that kind of more informed judgment going forward. So thank you very much. And I think we'll hopefully stop the recording and then start the questions.